focusing on the ethics of speaking the truth. Honest to goodness. The idea of how we respond when confronted with a query. Should we respond honestly or not? One Shabbos, a rabbi told his congregation, next week my sermon is going to be about the sin of lying. To help you understand that, I would like you to read Leviticus chapter 28, and we're going to discuss that next week. So the following week comes, and the rabbi gets into the pulpit and begins his sermon. Let's talk about honesty. Who read Leviticus chapter 28? Everyone's hand goes up. There's only 27 chapters in Leviticus. Right? The idea that's often our instinctive response is we want to please the other person, or sometimes we don't want to make the other person feel bad. But let's talk a little bit about what is the philosophy behind telling the truth, as well as what are some of the exceptions. I can imagine if I would ask you the question, should one be always 100% brutally honest? No, it doesn't seem to make sense. Society doesn't work that way. But when people lie to us, we sometimes or often can get upset. Back in 2005, there was a book entitled A Million Little Pieces. Right, heard of that, Stephen Fry? And it was his memoir of coping with alcoholism and recovering from drug addiction. It turned out it was, instead of a million little pieces, it was a million little lies. He made it up. And he admitted this, right? This was after a lot of publicity. But he defended himself. He defended himself saying that a million little pieces, there's some truth there, and where I lied, it was only to make it a better story to help other people. To turn it into a memoir of complete transformation is better than it being a memoir of just a little bit of drug addiction, a little bit of drug use, a little bit of alcoholism. That wouldn't make a compelling story. That wouldn't be inspirational. So I changed it, I lied to make it more inspirational. And so he defended himself. And the question is, where does the truth, pun intended, lie? So let's take a look at page 190, that first learning exercise. Right, some of the things that you often hear, or maybe some of them you are guilty of actually articulating. Ready in 5 minutes. Right? Say it. Sometimes you may even sort of mean it, but you know it may not necessarily come true. Fine, thanks. I know how you feel. Very sorry. Let's get together soon. Right? These are sometimes ways to end a nice conversation with someone you run into after having not seen for a while, even if you don't really know it. So there are often expressions, it could be, this is just common courtesy, people say these things, it's a known thing. I know you don't necessarily mean it, it's just making polite conversation. But how exactly does this work, especially that more and more we're finding this? So take a look at text number 1. If someone can please read. Okay.
Recently, a psychology study found that the average person lies about 150 to 200 times per day. At first blush, such numbers seem to stagger rather than inform. Most people would be offended if they were told that they tell an average of 8 to 12 untruths every waking hour. Nonetheless, after additional reflection and careful consideration of true day-to-day social interactions, we almost intuit that lying is not only more common than we expect, it is more necessary as well.
It just happens automatically. You don't even think about it until you study it and you quantify, you see how often it is. It's almost like the study that the average person touches his or her face. Anyone know this number? It's like 2,000, 2,500 times. Just think about it. Even whatever it is, it just automatically. We should sort of video the class and see how many times people do it. But certain things is second nature, and it's a little bit maybe sad or certainly surprising that we lie that often. Look at the case study. Women I queried yammered on and on. They giggled as they told of lying to or withholding the truth from their partners about their dress size, the cost of their hair highlights, whether they got Botox injections, or how much reality TV they watch. I will not be asking these questions today. One woman told of ordering takeout food as a newlywed and dumping it all in the pots in the stove before her husband came home from work. Another said she waited 3 years before telling her husband she had dropped one of the diamond earrings he'd given her down the sink. Each time he asked why she wasn't wearing them, she claimed they hurt her to wear. Another told of a friend who pockets the money her husband gives her for a housekeeper and does the cleaning herself. It's a matter of survival. Right? If you don't fib, you don't live. In other words, sometimes lies, at least the little ones, can help our relationships. We all want to be truthful. There is such a thing as tact, says Wayne Wilson, a retired financial industry executive in Seattle. When his wife asks how she looks, he always tells her she's beautiful. A bad hair day isn't going to change your life, says Mr. Wilson. What's to begin by saying something negative to someone that is of such fleeting importance? His wife says she is just fine with his confession. After 15 years of marriage, we both realize that maybe we have exaggerated at times, says Tamara Wilson, 48, who owns a public relations agency. Her standard lie, oh, you're so strong, honey. Right? So, are these untruths harmful? Are they a sign of dishonesty? In Judaism, we often talk about what's called ne'emanus. We talk about being believed. When people get married under the chuppah, there are two witnesses. And those two witnesses have to be upstanding individuals. Often the rabbi will ensure that they are observant, but also do they tell the truth? Because if they're there to testify that a couple is married, you don't want people who lie. So what about the fact that everyone just happens to tell all these lies every single day? What does this say about our truthfulness? And you see some of the possible situations where you may be prompted to possibly say something wrong. Learning exercise number 2 on page 193, right? I ask the age. How old are you? The younger we are, usually the less we feel we need to hide, but sometimes the older we get, we're not as comfortable sharing the age. So if you're uncomfortable, can you lie about your age? You could just say, I'm not going to tell you. All right, that could work. But what if you lied about the age? Or the other ones that are here, right? You have information about someone's illness, you share that information with the patient. Or a friend's spouse asks about what you guys did the previous night. And is it true that he got drunk on a recent business trip? Do you fudge the facts? Well, the examples that are there. Should you lie to protect your child from exploring a gruesome story? Very often, it can happen that sometimes there are children who are studying certain stories even within the Torah. The Bible has stories that are a little bit crazy at times. And how do you deal with some of those stories? The story of Dinah, for example. Right? How do you explain to a child that Dinah was raped by the son of the local nobleman? Or you just say, let's not think about that. There clearly are situations where we don't want to tell the whole truth. But what does that mean for us as honest individuals? Does this lying sort of add up and create a facade of dishonesty that impacts us in ways which we don't fully comprehend? Or if parents ask after the first job, so what's your salary going to be? And today's economy, maybe it's just an unpaid internship. You tell the truth. Say mind your own business. Obviously there's ways to always tell the truth, but that sometimes isn't necessarily going to be comfortable. So we're going to begin by looking at some of the philosophical approaches to telling the truth. And we begin, especially in time after the Enlightenment, when people began to try and understand the reasons for things and not just the morality of things, we encounter a couple of different approaches. And we're going to look briefly at two secular views when it comes to lying and honesty. The first is called utilitarianism. And as the name would imply, it's sort of acting in a way that just works out for things. And it focuses on the results and the consequences. No action is inherently good or bad. It all depends on what happens because of the action. If you do something and someone is helped or someone feels good or is happy, then your action was good. If you do something and that person is injured or feels pain, then the action must be bad. As everything is judged by the consequences afterwards. So let's look at text 2a on page 195, if someone will please read.
One way of thinking about the right thing to do, perhaps the most natural and familiar way, is to ask what will produce the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. This way of thinking about morality finds its clearest statement in the philosophy of Jeremy Bentham. In his introduction to the principles of morals and legislation, Bentham argues that the principle of utility should be the basis of morality and law. By utility, he means whatever promotes pleasure or prevents pain.
It all depends on its impact on those around you. So now, please read text 2b in Bentham's own words.
Falsehood, take it by itself, consider it as not being accompanied by any other material circumstances, nor therefore productive of any material effects, can never, upon the principle of utility, constitute any offense at all. Combined with other circumstances, there is scarce any sort of pernicious effect which it may not be instrumental in producing.
Right, sort of the idea, no harm, no foul, as they say in basketball, no harm, no lie. It's only considered wrong because of the negative consequences that could be produced by lies. Lying would only be wrong if it were to cause more harm than good.
And who's to determine
Me.
that?
It's always me. We're talking about honesty, not narcissism. Okay, clearly there's going to be a certain amount of judgment in anything. It's sort of, if that was, sort of, we always talk about how the classes are. These classes can be summed up in one phrase. Right? Last week was honor your father and your mother, and it's always about, we can encapsulate it. So I did not chop down the cherry tree. Right? George Washington famously said this. The idea of there being some form of evaluation necessary, whose opinion is it harmful and whose opinion is it good, that's something that we may not be able to solve tonight. But recognizing or understanding how various approaches towards honesty have worked, that's what we can do. So it's sort of like the question, is it good or bad to murder? Bad, but let's say for the murderer, it's actually pretty good. Right? Murderers, that's their business. So so we're just going to, let's just say, sort of whatever the standard definition of harm is, standard definition of good. Someone's feelings are hurt, bad. Someone who feels better, good. Some people like to have their feelings hurt. I don't know, maybe, but here we have the idea that it all depends on the outcome. Does this mean that each person should decide for himself when to lie, based on predictions? Oh, I'm going to say, hey, you look good tonight, right? Since I know that will make you feel good, so now you have to wonder: am I saying that because it's going to make you feel good, or do I actually like the way it works with the khaki and the blue and the pink and everything, right? So did I say that to make you feel good, or because I actually sort of like khaki and blue and pink? I do. I wore khaki and blue and pink the other day, but it's sort of, what is it? Am I telling a lie? Am I saying something just to make you feel good or because it's true? Look at text 2c. For an ordinary life, as Benjamin would be the first to agree, falsehood cannot be taken by itself. Most lies do have negative consequences for liars, dupes, all those affected, and for social trust. When liars evaluate these consequences, they're peculiarly likely to be biased. Their calculations frequently go astray. Therefore, even strict utilitarians might be willing to grant the premise that in making moral choices, we should allow an initial presumption against lies. There would be no need to see this presumption as something mysterious or abstract, nor to say that lies are somehow bad in themselves. Utilitarians could view the negative weight instead as a correction endorsed by experience the inaccurate and biased calculations of consequences made by any one liar. It's sort of, there's certain things, right? You don't make fun of someone else's mother. You don't, certain things that are accepted on the playground, so we'll apply those principles as well. But that's the idea that, look at, someone asks you a direct question. Think about what your direct response will do to the person. Utilitarian approach. Let's now look at Immanuel Kant. Has a very more black and white understanding of things, as was his general approach to ethics in text number 3, which is an analysis of his position. If someone will please read.
Kant takes a hard line against lying. In the groundwork, it serves as a prime example of immoral behavior. But suppose a friend was hiding in your house and a murderer came to the door looking for him. Wouldn't it be right to lie to the murderer? Kant says no. The duty to tell the truth holds regardless of the consequences. Truthfulness in statements that cannot be avoided is the formal duty of man to everyone, however great the disadvantage that may arise therefrom for him or for any other. Admittedly, helping a murderer carry out his evil deed is a pretty heavy disadvantage. But remember, For Kant, morality is not about consequences, it's about principle. The reason you must tell the truth, Kant states, is not that the murderer is entitled to the truth or that the lie would harm him. It's that a lie, any lie, vitiates the very source of right. To be truthful, honest in all declarations is therefore a sacred and unconditionally commanding law of reason that admits of no expediency whatsoever.
So lying is always wrong, regardless of the consequences. I'm looking for so-and-so, I want to murder him, is he in your house? You have to answer yes. Because any lie vitiates the very source of right. It's a sacred, unconditionally commanding law of reason that admits of no expediency whatsoever, no exceptions. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, ever. So does this sort of work out well? Right? What would be a major disadvantage of Kant's theory?
Well, like in the Holocaust, people were hiding.
Okay, you sort of take it to the extreme, right? Then it could lead to such horrific behavior like that.
He's not recognizing any other principles, or at least considering that they might trump the
Right.
principle of not lying under certain, that they may trump it.
Right.
So he seems to have a very narrow view of things. He doesn't explain why all of the myriad other principles you could come up with clearly come up short in his philosophy.
Okay,
What about that he doesn't take the consequence into
correct. It doesn't matter because the truth is something it cannot be touched. There's no good. You can't. Whatever good reason you give me, it doesn't matter.
What about protecting a child? I mean,
Doesn't
that
matter.
becomes a big thing.
The
What
truth,
age
the whole
is,
truth,
you
and
know.
nothing but the truth. That's what matters most.
What kind of life to this guy?
They're not a very happy one. Look at text number 4.
He would
Being
probably
set
go
against all deception is as wrong-minded as it is to loathe and distrust all bacteria, which necessarily include the ones responsible for wine and cheese and the normal digestive functions. So now we know that Kant did not eat wine and cheese. It's clearly a mistake to ignore context and consequences in evaluating bacteria, only some of which are culprits of disease. Others can contribute to the flourishing of life. The same can be said of some deceptions. We deceive among other reasons so we may not perish of the truth. There is the idea, looking at it black and white clearly leads to the types of scenarios that are being raised. But, at the same time, most people, I'm guessing, would say that inherently, sort of black and white, yes or no, lying is wrong. Right? That's why Pinocchio's nose grows, because he's telling a lie. There's something wrong with lying. The advantage of the utilitarian viewpoint is that it allows the wiggle room that Kant doesn't allow. The disadvantage is that it's very relativistic. There's nothing ever wrong, there's no right and wrong, it all depends on how it will be perceived. Sort of, how does it feel? How does it feel towards the other person? According to the utilitarian view, a lie is sort of just neutral. You lie whenever you sort of feel make someone feel good. And that's something that is a little bit too relativistic. It's also something that doesn't seem to fit with our understanding of Judaism, which with its focus on command. So on the one hand, you have this sort of wishy-washy utilitarian view, and you have this black and white Kantian view. And the truth, pun intended, lies, pun intended, somewhere in between. And let's take a look at some of the Torah's responses, some of Judaism's responses and understandings of both of these approaches. So look at text number 5 on page 199. Invoking this idea of telling the truth, Rabbi Abohav, who we've seen before, says, many evils result from one who accustoms himself to lie and prides himself therein. When his lie is exposed, the liar might resort to murdering, directly or indirectly. The individual will uncover the truth. The liar might machinate nefarious plots and zealously endeavor to harm the exposer. If he cannot otherwise harm him, make bear false testimony against him in order to cause his execution. If this too is not possible, he will slander him in an attempt to stoke a fight between him and his friends, even with his own siblings. Therefore, the Torah says, distance yourself from falsehood. Immediately thereafter it says, do not kill the innocent and righteous. Because lying is just the tip of the iceberg. It's like the Jewish joke they tell in the modern Orthodox community about how things are becoming forbidden, all these different things, because ultimately everything leads to mixed dancing. Right? We can't, everything is, we have to avoid the mixed dancing. All right, we have to avoid lying because who knows where lying is going to lead. It's going to lead to murder. You tell a little white lie, all of a sudden, you're murdering your neighbor. Okay, but we can see how a lie can lead to further behavior. The idea that we know lying is wrong. Because in rabbinic literature looks at this. Text number 6. Thus is the fate of the deceiver. Even when he speaks the truth, he is not believed. This is a midrashic comment when Joseph's brothers, Jacob's sons, come and say Joseph is still alive. So Jacob's initial response is, wait a second, you told me he's dead, now you tell me he's alive. You're a bunch of liars, why should I believe you?
That's the boy who cried wolf.
Huh? Correct, the boy who cried wolf. Right? Based on this midrash. Now we know. Yeah, recognizing that you sort of, like there's a line in the movie The Incredibles. If everyone is special, then nobody's special. Right? If you ultimately, if you can say whatever you want, then no one can ever be trusted. So we have that idea, recognizing the difficulty with a utilitarian approach. There's got to be some truth somewhere. And there's also a theological component. Look at text number 7a. Mahu chotamo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's God's seal? Rebbe stand the name of Rabbi Ruvain, truth. Emes, emet. The Hebrew letters Aleph, Mem, and Taf. There is this idea that God's signature is those letters, and that is what God represents. Aleph, Mem, Taf, beginning, middle, ending. You want to find God, you have to seek out the truth. And there is some element of objective truth. What is truth? Text 7b on the next page. Said Reish Lakish, Aleph is the first of the letters, Mem is toward the center, Tav is the last letter. This is the representative of the verse in which God says, I am first and I am last. There's the idea that what is truth? Truth is something which just has to be. Right? What's 2 plus 2? 4. Right? Unless some people like to say 2 plus 2 is please God for. Right? Everything depends on God. But 2 plus 2.
Base 10 it is.
Huh?
In the base 10
Okay. All right. So that is true. So even something as simple as that makes it even be questioned, which is why God is questioned. God is that type of reality. 2 plus 2 is 4. God is 1. God is truth. What's this?
Carbon.
Huh?
Carbon.
Okay, well, you see where it's going. You're going to call this a desk, but, maybe it's not a desk. What is its component parts? What's it made out of? Maybe you call it a desk and you call it a table. It's not necessarily as simple and direct. When we talk about God, we're talking about there being an element within our connection with God of this is the way it is. That we don't have this sort of sometimes this and sometimes that. Look at text number 9 on page 202. Shimon ben Semach Duran. If someone will please read.
The world stands on truth. Falsehood destroys it and distances the liar from God. Who is the epitome of truth? As it has been said, the seal of God is truth, and the verse states, God is true, and therefore the false liar shall not stand before his eyes. The sages have therefore taught, the party of liars will not meet the divine presence. How can truth and falsehood coexist when they are opposites that share no commonality?
So the idea, we have a more literal understanding that there are certain things which are absolute, which are objective and not subjective. And falsehood and sheker is viewed as something that is something we will not tolerate. And it's built into this sort of spiritual DNA that there is truth. So we mentioned last week with regards to honoring parents that Adam and Eve had no parents. So therefore, we were only really able to gain from them how they related to their children, not the other way around. They were never someone's children, so they related to their children. We don't understand respecting parents in that direction. So that's part of our human spiritual DNA. This too, this truth. At some level, there's going to be emet, God is one. That's the whole idea we talk about God being one. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. It's a math that exists even if it's not a base 10 system. That's always there. So Judaism has some difficulty with the utilitarian approach. As can be imagined, Judaism also doesn't work with the Kantian approach. It's less literal than Kant. Look at text number 11. Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "Now that I am worn out, shall I have my heart's desire? My husband is old." God said to Abram, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Can I really have a child when I am so old?' Is anything too difficult for God? At the designated time, I will return to you, and Sarah will have a son." The angels come and tell Abraham and Sarah they're going to have a child. What's the discrepancy in what Sarah says versus what God reports?
She was laughing at her husband.
Correct. She is saying, "Oh, my husband's old." When God reports what Sarah said, Sarah said, "I am old." He hides that element from Abraham. What about text number 12? If someone will please read.
Joseph's brothers saw the implications of their father's death. "Perhaps Joseph is holding a grudge against us," they said, "and he intends to pay us back for all the evil we did to him." They instructed messengers to tell Joseph, "Before he died, your father gave us instructions. He said, 'This is what you must say to Joseph. Please forgive the spiteful deed and the sin your brothers committed when they did evil to you. Now please forgive the spiteful deed that we, the servants of your father in the sky, have done.'"
At the very end of the Joseph story, Jacob has passed on. They go to bury him. They're on their way back to Egypt, and the brothers are worried. Now Jacob is gone. Joseph may take revenge against us for what we did to him. So they come forward and said, "Our father said before he died, be nice to your brothers." Problem is, that's not recorded in the text. So they're presenting the father leaving Joseph a last will and testament to be nice to his brothers that didn't exist. What's a common denominator in both of these scenarios? Yeah?
Sort of like protecting each other by it.
Okay, so first off, there's lying taking place in both, but we're not really bothered so much by it. There seems to be a noble cause. God is saving Abraham from Sarah's calling him old. Who wants to be called old? And in the second case, the brothers are ensuring that Joseph not take revenge. That would be a very bad decision. Certainly for them, but in general, we don't believe in vengeance, so it would be bad for Joseph as well. So they're both situations of lying. They're both situations where we can find there being a utilitarian reason to lie, and not speaking the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Yeah?
Could you say there are also both situations that, I mean, because we sort of know how the story progresses, that have to do with revealing something?
Right. I think that there's sort of, we know how the whole story is going to end up, so clearly we can't have Joseph taking revenge on his brothers. And we can't have Abraham divorcing Sarah before Isaac is born. We know that these things have to happen. But there clearly is in the interaction between them, someone did change the facts. Even before knowing what's going to happen. God did not quote Sarah. Jacob's sons did not quote Jacob. They made up a story to protect themselves. So even without knowing this, just the facts tell us that there was a changing of the truth. And the idea when we talk about when lying is allowed, see, as I'm teaching this, I'm just wondering, you'll never believe another word I ever say. Because, when all is said and done, you'll be thinking, okay, does he really mean that, or is he saying that based on that Talmud or that philosopher? Yeah.
Those two scenarios are different.
Okay.
The first one, you're protecting the other person.
Mm-hmm.
The second one, they're protecting themselves.
So,
which raises the question
Okay.
that the truth in this instance, in the latter story, should be an infraction.
okay,
Lie.
all right. So look at text 13. Let's get the ball rolling in terms of what are the parameters of these permissible untruths. Right? Text 13, one may bend the truth in the interest of peace. What's the example? So if you read, please, text 14. Read out loud. This is a classic example of this type of a scenario.
When two people quarreled, Aaron would go and sit with one of them and say, "My son, do you know what your friend is saying? He's utterly devastated and is literally tearing his clothes. He is saying, 'Woe is to me.' How can I ever lift up my eyes and look at my friend after what I've done? I'm so ashamed for having wronged him. Aaron would say with a disputant until he had removed the grudge from his heart. And Aaron would go and sit with the other party and say, my son, do you know what your friend is saying? He's utterly devastated and he's literally tearing his clothes. He's saying, woe is to me. How can I ever lift up my eyes and look at my friend after what I've done? I'm so ashamed for having wronged him. Aaron would say with this disputant too until he had removed the grudge from his heart. When the two quarreled and next meet, they would have to tease each other.
So he would tell each that the other was apologizing. And they would be so moved that when they saw each other, they would forget the quarrel. Now, you realize there's a flaw in this system.
You're a sociopath.
Okay, I think that we can put that asterisk on any situation. But the flaw in the system is when the guy meets the other one, saying, oh, it's so nice of you to apologize. And he'll be like, well, I didn't apologize, you apologize. And then the whole thing is like a house of cards and comes tumbling down. But Aaron would make up something. Not just change the truth, he would lie in order to keep the peace. You know, God didn't lie, God just omitted a certain piece. Sarah recognized that she was old, but she also said, my husband is old. And God left out that piece, sort of selective truths. But the idea of peace is one reason where the Jewish tradition seems to recognize or validate permissible untruths. Yes?
But we could learn from God's actions, but we can't learn from the brother's actions.
Okay, all right. So let's look at some other precedents for lying.
Sorry, if something really bad happened, say in a marriage, somebody was unfaithful.
Right.
To preserve peace within the marriage.
Okay. So look at the next text. Look at first. Peace isn't just people being nice. It could be a whole relationship. Look at text number 15. Our rabbis taught, what do we sing as we dance before the bride? The Academy of Shammai says we sing the praises of each bride according to her qualities. It sounds much more brutal in Hebrew though. The Academy of Hillel says we sing before every bride. What a beautiful and graceful bride. The sage of the Shammai's Academy said to those of Hillel's, if she were lame or blind, would we say what a beautiful and graceful bride? Does not the Torah state, distance yourself from falsehood? The sages of Hillel's Academy responded, following your reasoning, if someone made a bad purchase in the marketplace, should we praise the purchase or criticize it? Surely we ought to praise it. From this our sages derive that a person should always be congenially disposed toward others. The idea of finding a reason to avoid shaming others, we can invoke the idea of changing the truth. Also, you start looking at it within the context. What wedding isn't a beautiful event? So, and whose standards of beauty, and what exactly is it that defines this? But we have precedent in Jewish tradition, in Jewish law, of keeping the peace. We have precedent in Jewish law for avoiding saying something negative about someone. Now, what emerges in terms of, is it a blatant act? Is a blatant lie allowed? You get served a dinner, someone cooks for you, puts a lot of effort in, I hope you enjoyed it, I was slaving over the hot stove all day. Dinner, you take the plate, start eating. How is it? You don't like it. What do you say? Yeah, but you realize, come on, most people are wise enough. Okay, you're being awfully quiet there.
So give me
I'm overwhelmed by how delicious it is.
Give me some.
Well, that means assuming you have to eat the first.
Yeah, I know, you're really in for trouble.
So, what do you say? Do you say it's delicious?
Yes.
That's a real lie, though, because it's not delicious.
It's okay.
Okay, well, we're going to have to look at sort of this idea of a blatant lie or not. Some have recognize that since in Jewish tradition we recognize what you were thinking, say, delicious meal. Thinking of another delicious meal you ate the person cooked, or another delicious meal you ate the previous time, or something like that. But there is this idea of protecting the peace and not shaming someone, opens up the door for being more utilitarian. Another interesting series of exceptions introduced by the Talmud in text number 16. Scholars habitually bend their words in three areas: tractate, bed, and hospitality. So what is this referring to? Tractate. What do scholars change their words when it comes to tractate?
What is tractate?
Huh?
What is tractate?
What you're studying. Huh? So basically, when you call me for a question and I give you an answer, you can assume I just made it up. No. What does it mean? The example the Talmud talks about is that the Rambam explains that if a person asks the tractate, the section of the Talmud that the rabbi is studying, he can mention a different one that he knows better. Why? Because let's say the rabbi happens to be studying tractate X and he's having a hard time with it. The questioner may then probe, oh, Rabbi, tractate X, I've been studying tractate X. Can you please explain these difficult passages to me on pages 3, 4, and 7? The rabbi doesn't know, and the rabbi will be forced to admit his ignorance, and he will be embarrassed. So therefore, he can admit what he knows best in order to say, oh, I'm studying this tractate, even though he's studying a different one. So whatever question the person may have of him, he'll be able to answer smoothly. You could say it's a white lie. You're just talking about a different subject, changing the subject. But that's what it meant. That's what the idea meant. They bend the words. What about bed? Certain intimate relationships. Right? There's this element of privacy when it comes to intimacy. Beyond, obviously, drawing the shades. We're talking about that there's sort of this unspoken rule that this is something that's not spoken of. And if it is raised, it's not something that needs to be furthered in conversation. That's why within the Jewish tradition there's such a sort of veil of secrecy over what night women go to the mikveh, for example, because there's sort of an idea that night when women go back to the mikveh able to reunite with their husbands is a very lovely, passionate, intimate night. You don't want to start saying, having pictures of which women are lined up at the mikveh because that opens up a whole. You can imagine whether it opens up a whole. The gossip columnist will be tongues will be wagging. The idea, where did you just go? Oh, you don't have to say you went to the mikveh. You went somewhere else. Or if it's issues relating to intimacy, you don't have to bring them into public conversation.
This doesn't have to do with if someone knows someone's cheating on their spouse. It's something different.
Well, we should come back to that situation. What is, first off, I don't think you need to volunteer the information. What happens though if someone asks, is my husband cheating on me? Then that's a very, I think that I think it does relate to this a little. Because it begins that whole conversation. It's a whole host of things. It's certainly shalom without getting into the whole realm of the intimate.
But what about I know in Judaism there's a difference between if a husband cheats on a wife and a wife cheats on a husband, because if a wife cheats on a husband, she's not really allowed to be with him.
Correct.
So then it would be an issue.
Correct. Well, then you get into the whole shalom bias issue. Then you get into the whole what is the level of knowledge that you need to have about a particular forbidden relationship that would then require this type of separation. And here too, you can take a more constricted approach, or you can take a more expansive approach. In terms of, if the question piques your curiosity, do you investigate it to the extent that you'll have the information that will force these two to separate? I think the answer is probably not. Unless you're a private investigator, then maybe But I think that, for example, one issue that comes up sometimes with regards when couples get married in the Orthodox community, so the marriage contract, the ketubah, has different variations for first marriage, second marriage, divorce, widow, and the like. And one of the terms in the ketubah also has to do with whether it's a virgin bride. Now, how intrusive should a rabbi be in investigating what kind of language belongs in the ketubah? Right? It could be pretty awkward conversation. It's awkward talking about it right now. You can imagine. So there too, there's this idea of, there's a difference also between asking and saying and just leaving certain things unsaid. So when we talk about the intimate privacy, I think you get more complicated when you ask direct questions, because then you have to change answers, or you can just avoid saying something. It's a little bit different than bending the truth. But here, if there was a direct question asked about something relating to intimacy, you could answer falsely, avoid the issue. The third has to do with ushpiza, hospitality. And this the Talmud explains, and the Rambam Maimonides codifies, that it's the idea of if someone ate over in your home and has a great time, and someone says, "Oh, how was it visiting that home?" the person can say, "Oh, it was okay," because if you become the house to go to, then you'll be overrun with all the guests who know how wonderful a time it is, going to your place. So the idea of you can bend the truth in that type of situation as well. And the theme is protecting others from overburden. And so there's a certain element of protection which allows one to bend the truth. So we've seen a couple of different examples. We're talking about peace, we're talking about avoiding shame, we've talked about saying something that avoids embarrassing yourself to someone, so protecting one's right to privacy, especially when it comes to intimate matters. And we talked about protecting others from being overburdened. What are some additional examples? Another example has to do with finances. Text number 17 on page 209, if someone will please read. Don't be shy, people. It's English. Okay.
Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yossi were once traveling. They arrived at a certain location where they sought and found a place for lodging. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi deposited their wallets with the innkeeper for safekeeping. The next day they asked for their wallets, but the innkeeper denied ever having received them. They took him to a tavern and gave him wine to drink. There they noticed the remnants of lentils on his mustache. They went and provided this as a sign to his wife. They said to her, "Your husband told us to instruct you to give us our wallets. To verify that we are indeed his messengers, he gave us the following sign to transmit to you. The two of you ate lentils today." Upon hearing this, she allowed them to take their wallets.
Right, so first it's sort of interesting, they noticed the messy mustache, as, gentlemen, grooming is very important. But the idea, right, you obviously can't lie to a legitimate creditor, but here, people's wallets were stolen. They were able to bend the truth to tell a lie, not bend the truth, they told a lie in order to save themselves from an unlawful loss. So that's another category with regards to protecting oneself from being scammed. I wonder if that applies to all these calls you get during dinner time. Well, market research, no. It's like, I admit it right here, right now, get a call up and someone says, "Is Mr. Weinstock home?" Well, I know someone's calling up for Mr. Weinstock, and like I said, the 347 numbers and the strange area codes. So I'll say no. What am I thinking? I don't know. That's right. Well, I'm Rabbi Weinstock. Mr. Weinstock. There is no Mr. Weinstock is my son. My father's a doctor. My brother's a rabbi. There's no Mr. Weinstock. So sort of, but maybe to avoid this type of loss, maybe it's your loss of time or something like. I don't know. Maybe you're just justifying it. Yeah.
Okay, I have a problem with one of the things you used before, because I know it comes up, especially nowadays, especially certain terrible things like news, where like someone harmed somebody else, like a child or whatever. And especially in the Jewish community, you see that they're so much more concerned to protect the person who did something bad because of their family. And of course, it's not their wife and their children's fault that someone did something like their father and them. But at the same time, I just feel like those people get protected so much more than. Well,
I think as we have discussed previously, we have no, in general, bad things happen. You go to the proper authorities, and there's clearly different communal values. But I think that, as with a lot of this, when it comes to telling truth, first of those types of scenarios have a couple other factors in play rather than just telling the truth. One is, who do you talk to? If you're part of a Jewish community which is more separated from the rest of society, why would you want to tell anyone outside of that community? Well, it's the law. Well, wait a second. They don't really know how to properly treat these types of scenarios. One of the big examples when they talk about turning people in, which is known as the crime of Masira, giving someone over to the authorities, comes and dates from a time when there was a thought process: you give the Jews over to the government, they're going to kill the Jew. And it may no longer be killing the Jew, it may be incarcerating them in a situation where they won't be able to properly observe their traditions and customs the right way. That's not commensurate, it's not proportional to the crime, so it's not about the truth, it's about a clash of values and perspectives. The other thing you mentioned, just in terms of what that does to the person's family, also is an example of, well, wait a second, something is horrible here, but should everyone else suffer? Right? One person already suffered, victim. Should there be more victims because of the steps that we take? And I think these are the issues that are at play. And I think that, you know, for many of us, the answer is yes, it's worth it. Throw them in jail and ruin whoever has to be ruined because you have to protect. But these are the issues that are at play, and I think there's certain difference. There's certainly a difference in communal values. The same way we spoke about in terms of, it depends on where you are. The more you engage you are with the outside world, the less patience you'll have for those other types of dilemmas. Yeah.
But, you know, it's unfortunate, but it's happening so often today. I mean, it's become, you know, a common thing. Maybe in the old days, the time of the Gemara or whatever, you know, it was unheard of, you know, I mean, or it was not done. But today, it's like, it's so, you know, it's just such an issue out there.
Look, I think that certainly is an issue. Although I don't really think it fits in per se here. Tell the truth has nothing to do with this. It doesn't directly relate necessarily to this. It does connect a little bit more to the whole balancing act of when to recognize that, you know, how to weigh the different values that are at play in a particular issue. I think that, you know, as we've said before, those communities which are more closed off from society have values which are more internally directed towards what they view as the good of that society. And those of us who are more engaged in the outside world have a more expansive views of things, have more trust in the way society operates, and will therefore instinctively say, you know, what society demands is what should be done. I guess it depends which way, it depends which community you're more a part of. And, you know, I think, you know, it happens more and more frequently. That's what those of us on the outside say, those who are more sequestered and the type of lifestyle that's cut off from what we view as the rest of society. They view themselves as, you know, very possibly living in, you know, the way it should be, you know, more insulated from the norms. It'll make for good discussion. You know, maybe a whole separate JLI course on the subject, but it is it's more about telling something what was as opposed to lying about something that took place. So what about this element of the balancing act? You know, is there permission to lie? Is there an obligation to lie? You know, is there any sort of directives given with this respect? So look at text number 18 on page 211. Rabbi Elie said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Shimon, one may bend the truth in the interest of maintaining peace. Rabbi Natan said it's a mitzvah to do so. So here you have peace. Straight up. Was the dinner delicious or not? So one rabbi says, it's okay to lie. And the other one says, no, you have to lie. So there's this internal tension within the Jewish approach. Is this sort of an accommodation to wanting to keep the peace, or is there a mitzvah to pursue peace? And there's certainly a difference in the outlook, the philosophy behind those opinions. Yes?
Question, peace at any cost?
Are you talking about the Middle East now? What are you talking about?
They use the word peace, I'm using the
No,
word
so,
peace. What are they talking
well, you
about?
see, Rabbi Shimon says no, because you don't have to lie. You can say, honey, this stinks. Because says you may bend the truth, and you may decide not to bend the truth. So
today.
it's, you know, Rabbi Natan says no, Rabbi Natan would say no, peace at any price. Is this delicious? Yes, it's the best thing I ever tasted. And you should feel nothing wrong about that. It's absolutely an obligation to lie and keep peace.
So that would also probably include you should defend yourself. I mean, lying will, I don't know, I guess I'd have to think it on more carefully.
Okay. You know, but you know, when it comes to peace, we go out of our way. We look at text number 19. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Regarding other mitzvot, the Torah does not say that we should pursue them. So, for example, if a bird's nest happens to be before you, If it happens, chase away the mother bird. If you encounter someone in trouble, then help them. If you see the donkey overburdened, help it. When you beat your olive tree, when you harvest the olives off the tree and so you have to leave some for the poor, if you have an olive tree, then you have the mitzvah, as we talked about the other week with regards to charity. When you harvest your vineyard, you have to leave a corner. When you come to the vineyard of your fellow, the idea of leaving some for the employees who are harvesting, giving them something to eat. If these mitzvot come to you, fulfill them. There's no need to pursue them. When it comes to peace, pursue peace. Is what to seek peace and pursue it is what the verse in Psalms requires. So peace is the one mitzvah. It's not if it happens, do it. It's a kum va'aseh. You have to go out of your way to accomplish it. That would seem to support. It would seem to support Rabbi Natan's approach, and that is why peace needs to be pursued. What is this idea? What does it mean, peace, though? Well, we use the term peace a lot. You throw it out there a lot.
Well,
what is peace? Yeah.
Could be justice. I mean, that's kind of.
Well.
People say that. You know, what does that mean?
No justice, no peace.
Yeah, I mean that might mean what ostensibly looks like a lack of peace to obtain a certain amount of justice.
I think from a spiritual perspective, we're talking about shalom, peace, from the term of shalem, which means wholeness. So, for example, the term shalom bayis, which we spoke about, the idea of peace in the home, is not just having peace in the home. It's not just the people getting along. You're trying to create something bigger. You're trying to create a shared commitment of values to a certain higher cause. So we're not talking about just people getting along. All we are saying is give peace a chance. We're trying to create something more significant, a moral society, but also the divine essence being revealed from within creation. The idea of there being something significant, something holy, something that is wholesome, as opposed to just peaceful and everybody getting along. Yeah.
Are you just talking about peace between people, or is it also like?
So I think not.
Peace.
Well, I think we're talking about a sort of a more universal bliss, between the heavens and the earth, a more shlemut component. We're not just looking for there not to be friction. We're not looking for there to be good relations or peace treaties between countries.
But when it says to pursue peace, does that mean then that, like even like something like Israel, like something like that, they should be pursuing